Well, hello, everybody. You got Mr. Peyton here, the P-Dog. All right, we are continuing on with our Civil Rights Unit. In my years of teaching civil rights, I always hear the same thing from my students. They always say, oh, it bores me. Oh, I don't care. I've heard about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks so many times. I've heard about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks so many times. I've heard about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks. Oh, Mr. Peyton, I don't want to hear about them. And that brings us to today's objective. If you think the civil rights movement starts with Martin Luther King, you missed it! You missed it! The civil rights movement, the key moment in the civil rights movement is 1954. Martin Luther King doesn't become famous until 1955. Don't get me wrong. Martin Luther King is an American hero. Martin Luther King is a pivotal person in the civil rights movement. He is a hero, and we should all be thankful for his accomplishments. But let me make it clear. The key moment in the civil rights movement is 1954. Martin Luther King does not become famous in America until 1955 with the Montgomery bus boycott. That is Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, 1955. But Mr. Peyton's telling you today, the apex moment in the civil rights movement is 1954. So today's objective is to learn about three men that I call the forgotten generation of civil rights leaders. These are three men who had accomplishments before Martin Luther King. Without these three men, there is no Martin Luther King. But as Americans, we have forgotten these men. One big reason, television. Martin Luther King becomes famous in the television era. People are more familiar with seeing video footage of him, whereas these three men before him are before the television era. So let's understand how three men that everybody has forgotten, the generation before Martin Luther King, set everything up. These three men are just as important. They are just as much American heroes as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Huey Newton, and all the others. All right. Again, our premise that 1954 is the key moment in the civil rights movement, with Martin Luther King not becoming famous in America until 1955. But we're going to have to go back. We're going to go back a full generation to 1909 for our first of these three forgotten men. His name is W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois is the first black man to graduate from Harvard University, what many people consider the top university in the world. And when W.E.B. Du Bois graduated, blacks in that time period, again, 1909, they were still talking about, hey, we should wait for equal rights, hey, let's wait. And W.E.B. Du Bois said, hell no. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution says blacks should have equal rights right now. Why would we wait? So what does W.E.B. Du Bois do? He starts a very important organization called the NAACP. The NAACP is a black organization that fights for equal rights in the courtrooms. So, all right, W.E.B. Du Bois, 1909, starts the NAACP. Now let's jump 20 years later to 1929, and his name is Charles Houston. And just like W.E.B. Du Bois, Charles Houston graduates from what some say is the top college in the world, Harvard University. Now, Charles Houston graduates with a law degree, and he's ready to fight for those equal rights. He's going to go down into the South, into the Jim Crow South, and he's going to fight in those courtrooms for those equal rights. But Charles Houston's going to realize real fast, he's just one man, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of racist laws in the South. He's just not enough. What Charles Houston needs is an army of good, trained black lawyers to fight for these civil rights. So Charles Houston makes a decision. Instead of fighting law in the courtrooms, he's going to go back to college. But this time he's going to teach. Charles Houston is going to teach law to the best black brains in the United States. Charles Houston wants to make an army of black lawyers to fight for civil rights. But if he wants to train the best black minds in our country in the 1920s and 30s, he's not going to go to Harvard. Harvard, like many colleges back then with their racist policies, did not let many blacks in. No, Charles Houston is going to go to the best traditionally black university in the United States, Howard University. Howard University, located in Washington, D.C. Charles Houston's going to go to Howard, and he is going to train the best black minds in our country to be the best lawyers to fight for those civil rights that W.E.B. Du Bois said we deserve right now. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that all citizens have equal rights. Blacks should be fighting right now. And that brings us to our third man. The first man, W.E.B. Du Bois, 1909. The second man, Charles Houston, 1929. And the third man will have the key moment in the civil rights movement, 1954. Who is this third man that, in my opinion, won the civil rights movement the year before Martin Luther King became famous? He was the best student of Charles Houston at Howard University. Remember, Charles Houston is training the best black minds, and his best student, a name that every one of you should know, a great American, an American hero, the man who I say won the civil rights movement. His name is Thurgood Marshall. And it is shameful that in the United States, if you ask who are the greats of civil rights, Thurgood Marshall's name is not going to come up. Thurgood Allgood Marshall. So what did he do in 1954, the year before Martin Luther King became famous in 1955? Thurgood Marshall won the single most important court case for civil rights in American history. You've all heard the name of the case. Many of you have heard it, but did you know what the case was? The name of the case is Brown versus Board of Education. Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 is the case that changes civil rights. It changes America, and some people say it changed the world. To understand Brown versus Board of Education, we have to go back a half a century to 1896. Another Supreme Court case called Plessy versus Ferguson. We have already talked about Plessy versus Ferguson in this class. Plessy versus Ferguson is where the Supreme Court said that segregation is legal, that separating the races is legal. The slang term for that is Jim Crow. Jim Crow means separating the races, segregation, and it was made legal in 1896 in Plessy versus Ferguson. Well, ever since 1896, lawyers have been trying to reverse the Plessy case. They couldn't. No lawyer was good enough to reverse the Plessy versus Ferguson case that made segregation legal until 1954. And who is the lawyer that was good enough to reverse that case? His name is Thurgood Allgood Marshall, trained by Charles Houston at Howard University, and he represented the NAACP started by W.E.B. Du Bois. And what does Brown versus Board of Education do? It's where Thurgood Marshall gets the Supreme Court to agree that Plessy versus Ferguson was wrong, and that segregation is wrong, and that Jim Crow will be illegal in the United States. That is 1954. 1954 is the key moment in the civil rights movement. And that's got to make you ask, well, if Thurgood Marshall wins the civil rights movement in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education, what was the purpose of Martin Luther King? A huge purpose. You see, even though Thurgood Marshall won the case of Brown versus Board of Education, states in the South refused to follow the new law. And because states in the South refuse to follow the new law, we need more civil rights leaders to draw attention to the fact that states in the South are breaking national law by continuing segregation. And that's where Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Huey Newton, and all the rest come in. So let me be clear. Martin Luther King is a very, very pivotal, important person. He is an American hero. He is considered the national leader of the civil rights movement by stressing nonviolence, which was very key. And we are going to discuss why nonviolence was very key later on in this class. But what was today's topic? What was today's objective? To understand that while Martin Luther King becomes famous in 1955, the key moment in the civil rights movement is 1954, and three men led us up to that key moment. W.E.B. Du Bois in 1909 helped start the NAACP, an organization that fights in the courts for black civil rights. Then 1929, we have Charles Houston, who goes back to college, Howard University, to train an army of black lawyers to fight for civil rights. And Charles Houston's best student, Thurgood Marshall, who in 1954 goes to the Supreme Court and wins the impossible case to win when he wins Brown versus Board of Education that reverses Plessy versus Ferguson, and the national government says segregation in the United States is illegal and must stop. All right, that is the P-Dog, and I love me some civil rights. Hey, it's the holidays. Hold on. It's the holidays. Well, there you go. Hey, everybody, we're going into the holidays. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and we will continue with civil rights in the next video clip. This is the P-Dog, and he is out of here. Yeah.